Hello, hi, and welcome to Skipping the Small Talk with Now Autism, a podcast where we discuss everyday experiences, autism and family advice, and more. My name's Riley, and today I'm joined by Casey. Casey is a proud autistic individual. He's served our community through a variety of initiatives, including through working groups with the National Disability Insurance Agency and the Queensland Train Manufacturing Program, and he's a member of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. On top of all of this, he's also the managing director of Empower Autism. Welcome, Casey. So today I thought we'd start with sort of a more basic topic, go back to the central core of what we do and maybe a bit about why we started this podcast and just discuss autistic identity. You brought this topic up, of course, but it's sort of a very broad topic to discuss, so we're just going to see what happens for this episode. What made you decide to start talking about autistic identity?
I found that a lot of the way that we're talked about is with a lot of deficit language, and that's not the way I see myself and not the way I see other autistic people. The other morning I brought my daughter to childcare and I found the book The Ugly Duckling, and I read it to her, and actually brought me to tears because I realised that my whole life I didn't feel like all the other people did, and I didn't understand why I was different. And this moment in the story of The Ugly Duckling where the duckling looks up and sees the swans in the sky and then realises that they're a swan is like that for me when I first started to meet and interact with other people who identified as autistic. And I feel like I've found my people, and it's a beautiful thing to not feel so alone in the world, to feel understood by others. That was a big thing for me about getting my badge and wearing my badge. When I first wore it, I noticed that people would make efforts to understand and communicate with me, in particular service staff, and it was actually really good because people would speak clearly and literally and say what they meant, and I read a little piece of research that showed that when we autistic people meet someone who's not autistic, that they have a certain feeling of maybe an uncomfortableness or a cognitive dissonance that they can't put their finger on why we're different. But when they know that we're autistic and they meet us, that feeling doesn't exist. So I think bringing our identity out into the open and claiming it as our own, is maybe the next step forward for our movement as a people.
I think when I was growing up, I also felt like there's just something different about me, and for me, it was always put down to just being anxiety. And in primary school, I got diagnosed with anxiety quite young, so I was like, well, I just have social anxiety, and that's why I never learned to socialize with other people, because I just never did it. But being able to go, well, no, this is something bigger than this. This is something that's a part of me. And I want to take steps to understand that, even if it's not through formal diagnosis or stuff like that, can be really affirming and has really made me just more confident in myself. I think it was very scary for me, even like starting working here, and when people would ask me like, what do you do for work? I'd be like, well, I work for Empower Autism, and you can immediately tell what that organization is. And I don't know what your response to that is. But it's been really good. I don't think I've had any bad interactions with anyone when I've said that. They've all been very lovely, being like, wow, that's really interesting. Where even like telling my parents that and having them, previously sort of just not think about that, or be like, oh yeah, maybe you're autistic, but we'll just not talk about that. Having them sort of have to look it in the face, be like, oh, this is part of you. It's been a really, definitely an interesting process, but I think it's been a good one so far.
It really is part of our responsibility as autistic people to acknowledge the fear that we have within ourselves to identify and to say this is who we are.
Yeah.
Because my experience when I wear my badge, and it sounds like your experience, is that largely people are positive and accepting. So maybe it's a sticky floor rather than a gold ceiling that holds us back.
Yeah.
So pick up on something you were saying about being diagnosed as having anxiety. I understand that most women are diagnosed with 3 other things before they realise they're autistic.
Yeah.
And diagnosed, medicated, incorrectly and inappropriately often. And I think that I just want to acknowledge that the experience is probably different for people of colour and people of all kinds of other different people. It's a little more difficult for people to identify, and so there's no judgment at all on anyone who doesn't identify. I think it's important that those who can do and do so with confidence, because it's all if you listen to the leading professors in autism, in Australia today, they will speak of success as a reduction in the diagnosis of autism, and it's very hard to get away from it, because if you accept deficit-based criteria as your definition, let's say autistic people have profound difficulty with social communication, then of course we can justify any intervention that will help fix autistic people's communication. But it isn't this approach of intervention by holistic people, often with a lot of money from the state, from the government, doesn't actually help us to communicate better. It would be better if autistic people led our own interventions for our community, because we if we think about like the double empathy problem, it would mean that we didn't see our communication as a deficit at all, just different.
Yeah.
I think that the harm created by interventions, including behavioural interventions that try to suppress our autistic traits, like our natural movement, our stimming of our body, our, again, deficit-based framing says it's restricted and repetitive behaviour. The reality is it's an intense focus on one thing. And I think that we, as a human society, need to understand the value of our autistic people in doing this, in having this, the ability to hyper-focus and what's referred to as our special interests, and seeing those as valuable. The suppression of our special interests, our autistic children in classrooms who are not allowed to engage in their special interests, but instead forced to switch between activities into a neurotypical design of curriculum, is the reason why we protest, and our protest is pathologized as behaviour, and behaviour is something which needs to be changed. And then we have organisations that have a whole lot of money invested in changing behaviour, and it's as I think Professor Alicia Broderick used the term autism industrial complex. So money is involved in this, and it's hard to walk it backwards.
Well, I think a lot of the problem, at least in my mind, comes from how these organizations define what is valuable and what is a deficit in what context. In what context are they saying this is good because it contributes to this value, and this is a deficit because it contributes to this value? And a lot of the times it's merit-based, or your capacity to contribute to an organization's ability to make money in some way, or some other program similar to that. I think it's also helpful to take a step back and look at, well, humans are not designed just to make money, and we have value regardless of our capacity to contribute to someone else's schemes. We are intrinsically valued just as people. It doesn't necessarily have to be through someone else's system. So I think as long as we can find value in our lives in a way that makes sense to us, I think that's what's important to me.
Absolutely. And it is interesting also that if we were only to define people according to their economic worth, autistics would actually do pretty well as well.
Yes.
Take the list of the top 10 most successful people in the world, and half of them are likely autistic. That's not to say that, for a point, we need to value ourselves outside of, what do we call it, a neoliberal capitalist system.
Yes. Well, more pointing on your point about the school systems, where a lot of autistic children would be much happier and would probably thrive a lot more if they were just allowed to focus on what actually interests them, their special interests, as opposed to switching between different subjects in the way that the school system has decided it is most productive to work.
And maybe they would invent the things we need to save ourselves.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, Greta Thunberg's doing a pretty good job of advocating for around climate change.
She's not following anyone else's rules when she's doing that. She's not following any system.
In a very autistic way, she's authentic. She takes her boat powered by the wind. And it's I find in the current climate, as soon as you mention someone's name, you're immediately assumed to be arguing a particular from a particular side of what is now hyper-polarised social media landscape. That's why I like to use both Elon Musk and Grace Tame. I would assume you're not rooting for every part of these people, everything that they've done, when you point them out as examples. That's true. And just to put the final person on there, if it wasn't controversial enough. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 48. Sorry.
Yes, you said this.
Chapter 2, verse 48 to 53. It's a story about Mary and Joseph bringing Jesus to a festival in Jerusalem, if I'm not mistaken. And they travelled as a large group of people, and then they left the festival. So Mary and Joseph left the festival, assuming that young Jesus would be with them. And a couple of days later, oh no, where is little Jesus? And so they go back and they find him in the temple, and he's talking with the rabbis, which are like the religious intelligent people, and they're surprised at his intelligence for a child of such a young age. But his parents say to him, how could you not, I'm paraphrasing here, but how could you not know that we'd be worried about him? And then, Jesus turns around and said, how could you not know? I was about just doing my Father's business, as in I was doing the work of God. Jesus had autistic traits.
Yeah. It's a really interesting lens to look at Jesus through, because I think he's such a mythologized character, essentially, that people look at those things and they go, well, this is the work of a myth or a holy man. These traits are different because we're viewing them through this lens of this, or if you talk about Einstein or something as well, it's well, this is a genius though. These traits are explained by him being a genius. But when you strip away the mythology and the rose-tinted glasses and such, and just look at these people as people, it's well, no, how are these actions any different to anyone else today? And why are we treating these people as if they're some sort of higher being, the way people treat geniuses as having epiphanies and suddenly coming up with all these things out of nowhere? But we're treating people in our regular lives so differently.
I love the way how you went meta on that and deconstructed the concept of genius itself, or the concept of idolization itself, if you like.
Yeah.
It's a very autistic thing to do, and interestingly, each of those people, both Christ and Einstein, were probably fairly humble about themselves.
Yeah.
So they're, written about afterwards and iconized afterwards. But
I'm sure they were very much not treated in that way, but it's just interesting how we think about people of the past, or justify why people do great things and why people now couldn't do those great things. In my classes at uni, we've been talking about fixed versus growth mindsets, and the idea of fixed mindsets being that, well, everyone just is born with this innate level of intelligence, and they'll never grow beyond that, and you just have to get lucky. The same thing with creativity.
Yeah.
Whereas really, this is a skill that people build over time, and everyone has different ways of going about this, but that doesn't mean any one person is more or less capable of kind of anything.
And it's not fixed.
No.
Because as soon as you label it as fixed, the label creates its own truth.
Yeah.
So I hear experts in autism, or so-called experts in autism, talk about, the autistic rights movement's all well and good for high-functioning autistic people. I don't agree with the label high-functioning, but they'll talk about, there's people with profound autism. I won't charitably say it's unintentional, but it's divisive of our community, of our people.
Yeah.
If you ask my wife, she will tell you that I am at times profoundly autistic. If we're going to use their language, I'm situationally non-verbal, so I lose my voice. And when I look at the situation very carefully and pause it and slow it down, it's often in relation to I feel shock at the way that someone who's not autistic is doing something or has labelled me or has assumed something. It's like, so I think we need to have, and I've been fairly critical of some autism experts, but I think the answer to that, or a better answer to that, is for us to speak more about ourselves, more about our own identity, more about our own experiences, and to do so without the shame, without the need to mask.
The last thing we wanted to talk about was the importance of celebrating autistic identity. Yeah. Because we've had kind of a serious discussion here. I don't think it's been particularly negative, but there is a lot of value in sort of putting aside those negative things, or even in the face of those negative things, saying, I'm not listening to you right now, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to sort of revel in just existing. Do you have any thoughts about how you celebrate artistic identity?
Yes. Here talking to you, I feel at home, I feel comfortable, and I think celebrating autistic identity is part of that is communicating in whatever way we feel comfortable with other autistic people.
Yeah.
And it's an incredibly validating thing in a world that doesn't validate us.
Yeah.
To connect with other autistic people in a way that in whatever way that we like to do that. I think another way we can celebrate being autistic is to be where we have the ability and sometimes the privilege to do so, to look after our sensory needs, even in ways that defy social norms. So wearing my sunglasses in places where people don't normally wear sunglasses. We've just come from lunch with a group of people, and I put my it was noisy and there was lots of conversations happening, so I put my noise cancelling headphones on, and I think that's a real celebration of self, and that I'm important enough to give myself some sensory relief. That moving when I feel like moving, so stretching even when it's inappropriate, supposedly when everyone sits there. And it's funny because on some kind of advisory group with a group of experts in the room, and I get up and I stand up and I walk around, and it's like shock.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually diminish my autistic voice.
No.
And when I embrace my autistic self and speak from what I call my unmasked affect, so that's from my true self, that authenticity is I think is refreshing in a world that are very constructed and you're supposed to be a certain way, and so I think celebration starts by the little actions of looking after yourself and doing that and consistent with what your needs are.
Yeah. So it's the little things. It's being openly and unapologetically yourself.
Yeah. Awkward and proud.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. And it really is the autistic conversations that you have that just change who you are.
Yeah.
Dr. Chris Edwards is on our board, and the first time I met with him one-on-one, there was this prolonged silence that neither of us felt the need to punctuate. And that was the first time I felt like this is how we would communicate. If we didn't feel like we had to follow some kind of turn-taking rule.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful autistic cadence.
I think it's exciting to know that you can have these conversations that break these social conventions, and to know that, you know, people are living their lives authentically. Like, it's lovely to speak with you and to hear about your experience, because it really does feel like you are being authentic to yourself, and I think that is really encouraging for me as like a younger autistic person, and I would hope a lot of other people who are maybe listening to this video, if there's anyone out there.
Hello out there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your insight as an autistic person. Was there anything you wanted to leave us with?
Be your autistic self. You deserve it. It's your right. You are, use some of Grace Tame's words, but you're perfect just the way that you are. And if anyone has a problem with that, come and talk to Empower Autism, and we will have a good conversation about it.
Yes. Yeah, we've got your back. Yeah. I'm sure there's plenty of other people out there too. Yeah. Thank you for listening. This has been Skipping the Small Talk. I'm Riley, and this has been Casey. Thank you for joining us on this episode. Maybe we'll see you again in the future.
I can't wait.
Got plenty of things to discuss. So thank you, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.